Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of my quick hits. And on this one, I take a look back at what is a very special memory for me as we look ahead to a fight on January 17th between Bermane Stiverne and Deontay Wilder, in which Stiverne defends his WBC heavyweight title. An important fight with he defending against Wilder, an American soil, Wilder, an American-born heavyweight, Stiverne, a naturalized American heavyweight, with the heavyweight division kind of gaining traction again here in the United States. With that, I thought it might be fun for me to look back on the best heavyweight fight that I have ever announced. Now, when I talk about this, it goes back a little. No, wait a second. Let me look at that again. No, Dan Parks, our producer, put up what he believes is the first heavyweight championship match that I did. No, I was not around for
Are you sure?
Goliath.
No, didn't you get an autograph ringside there for that one, Al?
Okay, I did talk to Goliath afterwards and asked him, you know, what was it that made this match not work for you? But I was not actually there to do the fight. It was not David and Goliath, but it was in fact, and we'll look at the poster of it, Evander Holyfield and Riddick Bowe in their very first fight in 1992, a match that turned out to be one of the most stirring heavyweight fights of all time. Now, for me, this was an interesting time. I had been a broadcaster for about 12 years. I started on the national scene in 1980, and I had done many major pay-per-views during the 80s with the Ford Kings, Tommy Hearns, Marvin Hagler, Roberto Duran, and Sugar Ray Leonard. But at that point, I had not really done major heavyweight matches, just for a variety of reasons. And this one was a match in which HBO had a wing of their organization called TVKO that they were starting to do some of their pay-per-views. And my good friend Joe Goosen had been serving as the color analyst, and he didn't do this fight, or they were changing, and so they called me and asked, would you like to do it? I said, sure. Well, I was all, getting my preparation for it and getting ready to do this match when a couple of weeks beforehand, another friend of mine called and said, would you like to come up to Moab, Utah, where we're shooting a movie, because Scott Glenn, who's a fine actor, and who was in my favorite Western, Silverado.
Great movie.
Wanted to meet me and said he was going to give me some Western paraphernalia, and I brought to him some stuff from the Olympics in 1992 that I had done on NBC. And we met, we exchanged, we had fun, spent overnight in Moab, Utah. Driving back to Salt Lake City, where I was going to take a flight back to Las Vegas, and the roads were a little slippery, and the sun went down, and I took my sunglasses off and put them on the seat next to me. And when I did that, I looked up, and I had veered a little bit. I hit the brake and hit it too hard, hydroplaned. My car flipped 3 times, and wouldn't you know it, I had my seatbelt on the whole time, but I had just left a rest stop and forgot to put my seatbelt on. So the car flips 3 times. I'm flying around in the car, and I thought for sure that I had bought the farm.
Yeah, you're lucky to be alive.
Yeah, I really was, Dan. And the interesting thing is the car ended up on its top, upside down. I crawled out the back window, and interestingly, shortly after that, as luck would have it, the people gathered, and some people were kind of helping me, get through this, and a paramedic truck came by that happened to be coming by from one of the states. Well, as they were loading me into the paramedic truck, and this nurse was kind of tending to me, there were a couple of guys there and said, "Wow, is that Al Bernstein?" And the guy said, "Yeah." He said, "I guess this isn't a good time to get an autograph, huh?" So the woman, or the nurse, looked and said, "What?" She was appalled at that. And so I got in the hospital. Well, needless to say, it turned out, amazingly, the extent of my injuries was a clavicle that got displaced. And though the pain was unbelievable from the whiplash, and I was in that hospital for about 5 days, finally, I made my way back to Las Vegas. It was only a couple weeks before the Bowe-Holyfield fight, and then I had to fly to get to the Bowe-Holyfield fight back east. And I thought for sure I was going to have to do that fight with my arm in a sling, but I managed to somehow persevere. And Dan, you saw some articles. They even wrote about it. They wrote about it in about 10 or 12 different newspapers about my travails leading up to this fight.
That was unbelievable, Al, and I mean, literally, you were quite bruised up when you were calling that fight. That was amazing.
Yeah, I probably had more pain pills going through me. I was probably really feeling good for that fight, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, I did do the fight, and so let's talk about the fight because it was pretty extraordinary. Riddick Bowe, a much bigger man than Evander Holyfield, taking on a Holyfield who had won the, or challenged for the heavyweight title, and Riddick Bowe and Holyfield engaged in just an amazing war of attrition. And in the early rounds, Holyfield's hand speed and his ability to throw combinations were keeping him in this fight, even though he was fighting not quite the tactical fight that some had hoped he might to neutralize the power of Bowe. And you see from this picture, Bowe on the inside. Holyfield, and you can see the size difference, he just physically was having a hard time matching up with Riddick Bowe. And as this fight wore on, the power punching of Riddick Bowe ended up being just a bit too much for Evander Holyfield. And Bowe was able to land some very, very significant punches, and was able to hurt Evander Holyfield, and ultimately Riddick Bowe got the nod, almost stopping Evander Holyfield, but Holyfield was able to get through the 12 rounds, and this fight was Bowe's. It was Evander Holyfield was a warrior that night, and Riddick Bowe fought with such skill and such ability that you knew these men would ultimately end up fighting each other again. Ultimately, they did, of course, and that was the infamous Fan Man incident. They would fight a third time, in fact, and I was involved in all three because I covered the second fight for SportsCenter, and then for the third one in Atlantic City, I served as the host of the broadcast on the pay-per-view. So these two men would walk a long and exciting journey together in the sport of boxing. And what struck me about that first fight was the ferocity with which both men fought. And I think they later, I did a show in the studio with them after their first fight, and they talked about the respect that they had developed for each other. And I think that was one of the things that I took away from this fight, that they had tremendous respect for each other, even in going to war. Now, Riddick Bowe has been recently elected to the Boxing Hall of Fame. Evander Holyfield certainly will be when he reaches the 5-year period after retirement. But both these men put on an amazing battle, and I was privileged to be able to announce it, and it remains to this day one of the top fights that I have ever announced.